Welcome everyone to another episode of the Dragonus Podcastus. My name is Dead Ponic, her name is Lady Maeve, and we have a super special lore episode for you today. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so through the Patreon, the Fiverr page, and Lady Maeve's School for Creating Trick Dice. Lady Maeve, tell them about the school.
Hello, adventurers. Do you want to learn how to play D&D? Do you want to play in a weekly one-shot or campaign? Well, I have the games for you. If you're between the ages of 7 and 16, you can click on the OutSchool link and join one of the over 23 games from Monday to Friday with other kids your age. If you're between the ages of 16 to adult, you can join in on the fun with the Start Play link. I'm currently running 2 weekly campaigns, and I'll be running one-shots at least once a month. One-shots are a great way to meet the DM and see if you like their play style. My next one-shot will be Saturday, February 22nd, and we'll be playing Clockwork Heist. Play carnival games and then join in a wild chase as an important invention gets stolen by the Clockwork Brigade. Mention this podcast when you sign up for $5 off your first game with me. You can also check out the Fire Bunny Adventures Etsy store for fun adventuring companions and gear.
So, for this episode, this is super special. I have been wanting to cover a bad guy faction for a long time. We've covered bad guy factions a little bit in the past, but not to this extent. But I wanted to do this for two reasons. One, covering heroes in good guy factions has become a little old, and considering, universes like 40k exist where everybody is some flavor of bad guy, you kind of, villains are more cool. And, two, and yeah, I wanted to mix it up a bit, and two, villains are just cool. And they're far more interesting, to be totally honest, unless, the hero is one of those, they go from being the villain to being the hero, then, it gets more interesting that way.
Villains are the best part of any story or adventure. I've had people ask me before, what if we told a story with no evil and no villains? And I'm like, that's going to be a pretty boring story. You have nothing for the hero to grow or strive against. Villains add excitement and flavor to an adventure. And the more evil the villain, the more we root for the hero to take them down. Please comment below on the podcast on some of your favorite villains. Maybe we'll cover over them in the future.
So for this episode, since we're covering a bad guy faction, we're going to be looking more closely at Char, and we're going to be talking about the Charian Honor Guard. So for any Halo fans out there that played Halo 2, the one mission where you take out the Prophet of Regret, I think it is, he's protected by some Honor Guard. It's kind of like those guys. Now these guys are actually the most elite Charian military units that they have at their disposal. But they are assigned to, basically, for one specific purpose, which is to protect and defend the Charian Council, and most specifically, the Chairwoman. And before the Charian Honor Guard was actually created, the mayor of Char was actually protected by 3 noble warriors, who are also known sometimes as the Three Amigos, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis. Unfortunately, not even they could predict that what would happen, and they couldn't protect the mayor from the takeover, and so they were given basically an ultimatum: surrender their tunics and swear allegiance to the new regime, or become wanted men for the rest of their lives. They chose option 3 and fled to Tor, where they became part of the team that helped set up the Underground. If you've ever watched the 93 Three Musketeers live action film, you'll know it kind of plays out the similar way. And side note, as far as the story and lore goes, Torian intelligence has not confirmed if the leader of the Charian regime is in fact a woman or not. So take that how you will.
So that kind of answered my question. I was going to say, are we talking the 3 amigos who found the singing cactus and shot the invisible man before taking on El Guapo, or the 3 amigos who defeated France from Cardinal Richelieu? I'm interested in this underground movement. I'm sure we're going to learn more about them in the future. Yeah, we've got a good villain story starting. Keep going.
So, after all the times that the Charians have had uninvited guests barge into the council chambers, or cripple their slavery operation, or even worse, kill 5 of their best captains, they decided enough is enough. We're gonna deal with this now, and they needed a solution. So they looked at the Solaris Knights and they said, "Hey, why don't we make our own version of these guys?" Well, unfortunately, with the way that Char does everything, and because they're technically a sovereign state, they have neither the medical expertise nor the belief in faith or the financing to recreate that method to recreate a knight. So they had to turn to other less savory means, namely genetic mutation and splicing, what is often sometimes referred to as transfiguration or transmorphing.
You gotta wonder if the bad guys ever get tired of the good guys kicking down the door and taking over their lair. Reminds me a lot of the Phineas and Ferb cartoon where Perry the Platypus is always breaking in on Doofenshmirtz and foiling his evil plots.
Perry the
All right,
Platypus?
so Perry the Platypus. So actually the worst way to make a fighting force, pain, genetic manipulation. So are these guys like the Chaos Marines from 40K in that these mutations affect their fighting style, either good or bad?
Actually, yeah, that's pretty close to it, except there's less Eldritch monstrosity type mutation. It's more like, did you ever watch the original Turtles show?
Yes, the Ninja Turtles. Yes,
So
definitely.
it kind of works like that, where like the ooze, whatever it like. So the turtles, they because they were in contact with humans, when the ooze touched them, they became more human-like. And in the original show, Splinter, who was actually a Matoyoshi, because he lived with the rats and he had a lot of contact with the rats, when the ooze touched him, he turned into a rat. In some versions, he's actually a rat before he gets, and the ooze makes him bigger. He's not actually a Matoyoshi, but in the original cartoon, he was a Matoyoshi. And it kind of works similar like that, where like, and also in the very first episode, Shredder actually splices the DNA of 2 of his goons with 2 animals, and that's actually how they created Bebop and Rocksteady. And
I love
those
Bebop and Rocksteady.
those 2 are like, they're just like the perfect villain minions. Anyway, so they start off by indoctrinating children and basically brainwashing them to be loyal only to the Charian regime and only follow the orders of the Inquisitors and the Chairwoman herself. And in order to contend with the raw strength of a knight, the Honor Guard are given specialized armor and equipment based on what type of guard they are, and there are actually 4 variants.
So when you have a regime using children as soldiers, that is usually a pretty good sign that they are utterly evil and probably need an intervention from the good guys.
Probably. So there's 4 variations of the Charian Honor Guard. The first, now some people might recognize this from the Stargate series, but the first variant is the Anubis Guard. So, and they take after Egyptology. Anubis was the Egyptian god that kind of looks like a dog. I think he's the god of the underworld and death and all that. But the Anubis Guard are labeled as, quote unquote, the attack dogs among the Honor Guard, because their specialty is basically biting at the heels of anything that threatens their protectee, and they can smell deception and any attempts to hide in plain sight or from far away fairly easily. And they also have canines that can rip off limbs and strike at vital arteries and veins. These guys are actually the ones who are involved with the interrogations and tracking down of any fugitives or prisoners.
So I'm picturing the guys from the Stargate movie where they had the Anubis guards inside the temple. They had these like robotic helmets where different parts would raise and lower. And they also sound a little bit about the 40K Warhammer Space Wolves, who are genetically engineered almost to be, well, they're based on Viking culture, but they have a lot of werewolf characteristics. Funny enough, in D&D, with all the animal races, cat, rabbit, snake, you don't actually have an official dog race yet.
We're working on it. We're working on it.
Yeah, we
And
need something.
it's funny you mentioned that, because specifically the Serpent Guard in the Stargate series, they're the ones that actually have the thing the helmet comes up. Believe it or not, Teal'c was actually a serpent guard. He served under Anubis. Every system lord has their own very specific guard that protect them or when they go into battle or anything like that. So next up is the Horus Guard. These guys are actually the only ones among the honor guard that are actually capable of flight. And basically, if it isn't made clear, they're basically they're spliced with what's that race that has like they look like birds and they can fly. I forget what they're called.
The Aarakocra. They can be any bird species. There's also Aasimar, which are angels, but these are sounding more like the Aarakocra bird race.
Yeah, basically it's like that, and they are actually the only ones that actually have had like physical modifications done to them, namely the ability to speak in bird tongue, and possessing like really like long and sharp talons like a bird. And they are often described as the quote-unquote alarm system. In when they screech, you'll know immediately, and you'll be screaming at the top of your lungs, somebody shut them up, basically. It's like your alarm going off, except it's much louder and it's much more annoying. And they can also spot hidden enemies from far away, because just like an eagle. But I think the more accurate comparison would be that of like a condor or a vulture rather than an actual falcon or an eagle, because of the way they're very like they perch onto something and they look at something and they kind of observe from a distance, and they only like ever go in like if there's like an actual good opportunity and there's no chance of them being in actual danger.
Nothing hurts your ears more than a parrot screeching at the top of its lungs. And we just spoke like this could be an Aarakocra if you're building these guards in your own game. An Aarakocra can be any bird species. So I've had macaw Aarakocra, flamingo Aarakocra, hawk, eagle. Somebody even did a peacock and he was a bard. It was awesome. These guards would make great sentries if you scattered them with the Anubis guard. So you put a couple of these bird folk in for visual, basically scanning the battlefield and then alerting the Anubis where to go. Could be useful combination there.
Oh, we'll talk about the rivalry later, but it's never a good idea to put specifically the Horus Guard and the Anubis Guard together, because let's just say it ends with bloodshed and a lot of friendly fire. Let's just call it that.
Okay, I was unaware of the rivalry, so that would make sense not to combine them, but maybe put an air sentry up where the Anubis can't get to them. It sounds like they're not going to work together for the greater good, which in evil armies, that's the benefit of the hero if the evil people don't work together.
It kind of reminds me of like how like the Uruks from Lord of the Rings, they don't get along well with the Morgul orcs from Mordor. And there's actually that one scene in Return of the King where like they're like Kira's uncle, I think it's in, and the Urk goes, "The scum tried to knife me! Kill him!" And then it leads to a full-out civil war, and they just kill each other. It's pretty much like that in a way. Now,
meat's back on the menu, boys.
Exactly. So the next variant is a common one that you see in almost every Stargate episode, which is the Serpent Guard. These guys are actually different because while they do look like serpents, and that's true, and their helmet actually pops up just like in the show, the difference here is that they were able to basically splice their genetic makeup with that of a snake, namely a Yuan-Ti or just a regular snake, and they created the Serpent Guard. They are given actual full immunity to venom and toxins, and depending on the variant of snake or Yuan-Ti we're talking about that they're spliced with, depends greatly on what kind of powers they can get for themselves.
Snakes? Why did it have to be snakes? Nice Indiana Jones reference. So because they're spliced with Yuan-Ti DNA, do they also have the ability to shift into full snake form like some of the Yuan-Ti do? Or is it more they're humanoid all the time?
They're humanoid. I don't like making this comparison, but it's very like almost Voldemort-ish, where like they have certain traits related to snakes, but they're not fully there. They're still kind of humanoid. I don't like making that comparison, but that's the closest thing you to make a fair comparison on that end of things. So For example, depending on the variant we're talking about here, the Black Mamba. All poison attacks are stronger as the Black Mamba, pound for pound, has one of the most potent venoms in all the world. Then you have the Spitting Cobra, which they have the ability to shoot or spit globs of venom into the eyes or face of any enemy, even with their armor on. And this venom, depending on the desired effect, can cause paralyzation, temporary or permanent blindness, and believe it or not, temporary unconsciousness. It depending on what the intent behind spitting the venom itself is meant to entail.
When I was hearing all this, reading over the thing all about the poison stuff, all I could think is somebody grabbing this guy, and just forcing him into a cup so they can milk the venom out of him. So the question is, has the good guys started capturing these snake people yet and tried to make anti-venom out of them by collecting the toxin?
Well, because they're spliced with snakes and because of these specific traits, they actually do have like a somewhat a fair trade deal with the actual UNT, where they can actually like they will actually get their they can milk the venom from the UNT to make anti-venom, though it doesn't come up very often because the Serpent Guard are probably they're the most common, and therefore they're the ones who usually knights or sisters are more prepared to go up against. Then you have some of the more venomous snakes, which are the inland taipan, based solely on potency, based on what I've read and researched. The inland taipan from Australia is the most venomous snake in the world, and the taipan serpent guard can create a noxious gas from their bodies and armor that can either paralyze, incapacitate, or just flat out kill, depending on the intended result. And then you have the king cobra, which is what the serpent guard are actually based on. More of a combination of something like a desert cobra of some kind. And the king cobra is the king of snakes, and the only variant here that's venom, at least in this case, is not as potentially lethal. The king cobra variant are often brought in during interrogations and or torture of prisoners to basically, bite them and infect them with their venom. The venom is a powerful hallucinogen that also forces the victim to experience their worst fear personified, kind of like the scarecrow fear toxin thing. And the only release is if they reveal any information they have or they confess to a fabricated crime, then they'll get their antidote.
So, fun nature fact of the day, there's actually wild populations of cobras living in the Florida Everglades currently. We had a huge hurricane back in the 90s called Andrew that knocked out Zoo Miami, and a lot of the reptiles escaped into the wilds, and this is prime serpent territory, so they've established breeding populations. So for the hero side of it all, I'm thinking some kind of trained mongoose or honey badger type monster that the good guys could potentially use to take on the snake guards with.
Oh hell,
Honey badger don't care.
Yeah, honey badger don't give a damn. But also, you could have a druid basically shape into a mongoose or a honey badger, and they would get certain effects for that. But the serpent guard are very their venom and all that is very short supply. Like it's not something they can just waste. And plus, it's produced in their bodies, so that sometimes if you can actually locate their venom gland and disrupt it, you can actually take out the whole venom thing in question. And that's true for most of the serpent guard, and true for most snakes.
A lot of snakes will reserve their poison for actual hunting because it is a precious resource that they create. So, not all the time you get bit by a poison snake do you get poisoned. Sometimes they have something called a dry bite where they don't inject you with anything.
Yeah, and for any of our snake fans who are afraid of snakes, I would not recommend watching Snakes on a Plane, because I recently watched that movie, and I learned quite a lot about that movie, believe it or not. Anyway, so for some reason or another, the Serpent Guard specifically are afraid of Steve Irwin. He just runs around and does his thing, and this has led to to some of the other honor guard, particularly the horse guard, to imitate Steve's voice in order to get them to kind of run scared or go completely docile. Oi, how you doing? Look over there. There's a king cobra. One bite from it and I'm dead. I'm gonna pick it up.
I can just see imaginary camera crew following him around going, I could just see him like grabbing a snake guard, shoving him in front of the camera so his face is in the screen going, isn't this one a beauty? Gosh, look at that coloring. Oh, he's a little angry. And then at some point, Steve Irwin's going to get bit because he always got bit or stung or something happened in every episode. That would be hilarious that in the middle of warfare, like this Australian guy's running around, grabbing people, shoving them in front of a camera. It's like, look at this one. And everyone's like, we're in the middle of war here. Not the time.
So our final variant is the Satesh Guard. So these guys are actually the most obscure and most deceptive out of all the honor guard. Their helmet is similar to that of a fox or a jackrabbit. But because whatever the creature is meant to represent Satesh, or at least that aspect of it, the Satesh Guard as a whole, not just their helmets, have become and continue to be the source of many jokes among the Charian peoples and among the other honor guard. And now comes the part where I get to tell the only joke from Stargate that actually made Teal'c laugh. And maybe if we have time, my own variation of it. A Serpent Guard, a Horus Guard, and a Satesh Guard meet on a neutral planet. It is a tense moment. The Serpent Guard eyes glow. The Horus Guard's beak glistens. The Satesh Guard's nose drips. Sorry. And if anybody's actually ever seen that episode, the look after, and Teal'c was probably just thinking, because nobody was laughing, and I'm disappointed that Selmak did not laugh at this, but he was probably thinking to himself, oh, screw you guys, that was funny. And if you understand anything, the way that the Goa'uld operate, they operate through intimidation. So you tell me if a Satesh Guard's nose dripping is intimidating, which it probably isn't.
Not unless you're an extreme germaphobe and you're like, get that snot away from me. It's going to infect me.
Now, don't let this joke specifically and their strange appearance fool you, though. The Satesh Guard are arguably the deadliest honor guard variant because, A, they have these massive claws that can shred a person, and they also pull that whole thing with the Monty Python rabbit gag where they look cute and innocent or they don't look harmless, and then they'll rush in and rip your head off, basically. And they're quite dangerous. It kind of reminds me a little bit of a little bit like Wolverine. He doesn't seem dangerous, but once he gets in your face, well, you can kiss yourself goodbye, basically. And I like to compare them sometimes to actually bees or wasps. They are ungodly annoying, and they kind of there's a sick pleasure they take while they're gutting you like a fish, basically.
So, looking at all of the honor guards, strictly based on training, equipment, upgrades, surgical augmentations, mutations, how would they fare against a group of Solaris Knights?
Well, I like to think of it like this. If a squad of each variant of honor guard were to ambush and take on a squad of, let's say, 5 knights, if they had the element of surprise and they took advantage of their abilities, I say they have about a 90% chance of actually coming out on top. They would take a couple casualties, though, most likely either a Serpent Guard or an Anubis Guard, but if the 5 knights were aware that a team was after them, but the squad still had the element of surprise, but nothing more than that, they would probably suffer more casualties. But they would probably get at least 1 knight. The Serpent Guard would most likely use their poisonous abilities to end themselves so they wouldn't be captured or interrogated. The Satesh Guard would go down fighting. The Anubis Guard would probably limp away before sadly dying from their wounds. And then somewhere out there in the universe, John Wick gets really, really, really mad. And the Horus Guard, they would just bugger right off. There would be no point in them sticking around. So, and I talk...
So I'll...
Sorry. Uh, so we talked about I talked about quickly the rivalry between all the guard. And it's more common among the Anubis and the Horus Guard because they don't often get guard duty to protect the Chairwoman and the Charian Council. They're often doing other things like interrogating prisoners, finding out spies, things like that. The Serpent Guard and the Satesh Guard are actually they're more friendly towards each other because there's more of a deception and more subterfuge thing going on with them. And generally speaking, the Horus Guard are more likely to get along with the Serpent Guard than the Anubis Guard. They kind of try to stay away from the Satesh Guard because they are aware of their reputation, but they don't really trust them. And then the Anubis Guard are just, they're described as the attack dog, so they'll attack anything. They don't really trust anybody, and they especially hate birds.
All right, so that explains the don't put the Aarakocra with the puppies thing. So knowing the Honor Guard, they're obviously a special force. How many of them do you say are in the kingdom in total? Like, is it more than... okay, let me put this correctly. So the good guys have the Solaris Knights and the Sisters, and they're a percentage of the population. Is it equal percentage of population that's Honor Guard and the Taurian side, or is it they have more Honor Guard, less? Like,
I would say it's less because what they also will do sometimes is they'll go up to random villages and kidnap children. They'll indoctrinate them and brainwash them. They don't generally take from their own population because the population is either fully aware that the Charians regime is full of bull, and they're just doing what they can to survive, and they can't really escape because then they'll get tracked down and accused of being traitors. So and sometimes what they'll do is they'll take from their military ranks, they'll take from innocent villages. Hell, they'll even go out to the farthest reaches, like they'll kidnap an elf child, or they'll kidnap they'll even kidnap a UNT sometimes and kind of say, hey, you're going to train the Serpent Guard, otherwise we're going to kill your family, basically, kind of thing. And, well, let's just say the UNT don't exactly appreciate that, but they're kind of forced to do what they want. And they'll either get released and then later killed, or they're just flat out killed once their usefulness is over, basically. Alright, so that's our episode on the bad guys. We're going to probably be doing more of these, but what are your thoughts before we wrap up?
so these guys would be a lot of fun to throw into a campaign. I'm thinking maybe the good guys have to go break a prisoner out of a castle or a underground dungeon or something, and it'd be fun to sprinkle in all the different honor guards for them to encounter. Make for a challenging session.
I imagine just to really throw a wrench in the in the players. It's for the newest guard. You could have Pluto come in for some reason, and just you're like, why would I attack Pluto? And then Pluto turns out to be super vicious or anything, and you have to fight him or something. Hell, you could actually, I don't know if they actually did this, but you could actually make a mouse race. That would actually be pretty cool.
That would be really cool. I know Humblewood has one. They're a 5e supplement. Now for Horse Guard, for most annoying alarm bird, I would either go parrot or peacock. Peacocks have that screech that you can hear for miles. But yeah, they sound like a really fun group of guards to go up against, and everyone loves a good villain.
Well, these are more the villain's minions, but yeah, that's a fair assessment. And though arguably they're not as dangerous as some of the other bad guys in Char, but we'll get into that later in another episode possibly. Anyway, next week we're going to be covering the magical world of Narnia. Stay tuned for that. We'll see how that goes and see if we can survive floating down an icy river on nothing but a pan of frozen snow.
Stay away from the Turkish delight, everyone, and we'll see you next time.